So that's the seventh basic rule of the law of armed conflict. Parties to a conflict shall at all times distinguish between the civilian population and combatants in order to spare the civilian population and property. Neither the civilian population as such nor civilian persons shall be the object of attack. Attack shall be directed solely against the military. That's probably more than any of the rules that Putin has violated as far as the international criminal norms. So those are the rules. These are the rules and principles which govern military acts of engaging in armed conflict, the craziest and most irrational and wasteful activity of humankind. They have been translated, these rules and principles, into international legal norms in treaties, such as the Geneva Conventions and customary international law, as we've said, with binding legal force on countries, on states that ratify the treaties. Armed conflict exists whenever there is a resort to armed force between states, two or more states, or protracted violence between governmental authorities and organized armed groups, or between such groups within a state. There are certain non-international armed conflicts that are covered by international humanitarian law, which is mainly for covering armed conflict between countries. But now there is an exception, a small area of humanitarian law that covers non-international armed conflicts. Keeping these principles in mind, we will look at the specific international criminal norms. Norms are standards of conduct, both treaty norms and customary norms relevant to the Ukraine, the situation in the Ukraine, and the international crimes Putin can be accused of violating. So where do we find these international norms, the criminal codes, so to speak, where it's written out what you can do, what you can't do in the fully legal sense? Not just principles and rules, but the international laws. As a material source for legal norms, we look to international treaties and customary law, as we've said, such sources as the Draft Code of Crimes Against the Peace and Security of Mankind, which was done in 1996, which basically stated the state of customary international laws to crimes against the peace and security of mankind, which included genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression, which are the crimes we're going to be talking about. There's also the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which is a treaty adopted in 1998 in Rome, which established the International Criminal Court and set forth its jurisdiction, what particular crimes it covers, and when and where and what states, etc. Russia has not ratified the Rome Statute, and so it is not strictly legally bound by it. However, the statute is declaratory of customary international law, and because the Ukraine has accepted the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court for events that happen on Ukrainian territory, which it has the right to do as a sovereign nation, this applies to the present conflict, and a case investigation has already been initiated by the International Criminal Court prosecutor against Russia. It is relevant to understanding the norms which may be alleged as violated. So the Rome Statute, even though it's not strictly speaking binding on Russia, can be used because it will be the basis for which the International Criminal Court prosecutor will look at what Russia's doing and make judgments as to the crimes that they're committing. I don't want to get into the International Criminal Court because at this point the chances of being prosecuted there are very convoluted. It's not easy to say how that might happen, but there may be an investigation, there may be a referral, there could even theoretically be a referral by the UN Security Council, but that will never happen, we know, because Russia would veto that as one of the permanent 5 members. Okay, This list of the crimes that I'm going to talk about, the types of crimes that Putin, I think, has committed, which is going to follow here in a second, it's not inclusive of all the international legal norms that Putin has violated. You know, for example, the UN Charter, the article on non-interference with the internal affairs of other countries, a non-intervention clause. There's just a whole lot of international legal norms that Vladimir Putin has violated. Again, for example, the European Convention on Human Rights and other international human rights treaties such as the Torture Convention. But we're going to look at international crimes that are based either in treaties or in customary law. And we're going to be citing as the source of those where you read about what is prohibited primarily in the draft code of crimes against the peace and security of mankind, and also the Rome Statute, because again, that's declaratory of customary international law to a great degree, and it's the most current statement of the status of the law. Also, there's a huge body of jurisprudence, case law, case decisions coming out of international legal bodies, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Rwanda, for Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia. There are other international tribunals that have taken place that have made decisions in cases. All of that supplements and interprets and amplifies and defines a lot of these international criminal norms. So for right now, we're not going to be applying those norms as a lawyer sense to every situation that we've seen happen before our eyes. We're just going to define what the crime is so that you know what they are. And then I'm going to read some of the elements of that crime, the predicate acts of the crime, so you can see the types of things that are covered by the term, for example, genocide. What are the predicate acts that constitute genocide? Okay, so as an example, this isn't a black and white area, and there's some difference between scholars as to what's covered and what's not, and how to interpret that, what norms apply. But anyway, I'm kind of giving you just a general idea of what are these crimes and what are their components. What do they sound like? What do they cover? A lot of these will seem to be overlapping, for example, between war crimes and crimes against humanity. So you'll hear a lot of similar terms, and I hope this doesn't get confusing. The main thing is that you understand the name of the crime and basically what it's trying to prevent. In addition to, okay, I've got that. Okay, so I'm going to start right now going into the 4 different major international crimes that I can accuse Putin of committing. But first, a little break.